Okay, compost. So here's a couple composts I've worked with. This is a dairy manure compost that I worked with in Texas, a really good quality one. Like I said, in vegetable production, we try to get out 10 tons of compost per acre. This is another kind of a compost that is from Jeff Poppin's farm in Tennessee. This has a similar starting point in terms of the raw materials, okay? However, this one has been treated with clay and with the biodynamic preparations, and it has a much more spongy, humusy kind of material. And in fact, this is real interesting, that there's a lot of variation in compost quality, and you can make compost better. Now, Charlie's compost was mentioned earlier. I got him in the slide later. I've worked with Charlie, and the system that he's producing comes from Austria, and that system this is the term we use, is humified compost. And one of the reasons that it is a unique kind of compost that's made in Kentucky is that it is amended with clay. About 10% by volume of the windrow is amended with clay. 10% of the windrow is amended with a finished compost. It's sprayed with microbial inoculants to regulate this decomposition and humification process. And it's covered with a green compost fleece blanket to help regulate that. And it's turned frequently. It's monitored for CO2 and oxygen. And there's a lot of work that goes into making that good quality compost. But that's what you're looking at. So the thing I'll say about compost is, if you have a dairy farm or a poultry farm, you can make compost easy. If you don't, and you do not have animals on your farm, it's not going to be easy. So a lot of farmers are just looking to buy some from someone else. This gets into the price. It's sold on a cubic yard basis. There is 1.5 cubic yards per ton. So you can see right now we're putting out 15 cubic yards per acre when we're putting out 10 tons, okay? If you're in a place like Texas with a large dairy industry, you can buy compost at the source for $20 a cubic yard. You ship that, and now it's $40 a cubic yard. You go to a lot of these nursery dealers, and they're selling their compost for $45 a cubic yard. So you can kind of see that there's a kind of there's a cutoff point where it's feasible to be purchasing compost at this price. And so what I want to do is I want to show you how to make smaller amounts of compost, high quality worm compost, and make an extract from that in a smaller volume and make it more affordable, more do-it-yourself. Here's one of the reasons why people are excited about this compost, and it all goes back to this topic around soil biology. And that is that this is what compost looks like underneath a high-end scanning electron microscope. So this is a researcher up in Ontario, Canada, and he took some compost, put it underneath his microscope, and zoomed down on it, and this is what he saw. It is literally covered with microbial biomass. So you have fungal hyphae, actinomycetes, various kinds of critters, and it's very rich, covered in fully with microbial biomass. So I'm going to show you a neat way to take advantage of that. So here's the other thing, worm compost. So the first kind of compost we talked about is the thermophilic that's turned and heated up and all that. This is worm compost, okay? I was actually in India to do a tour of worm compost facilities. India and Cuba are the world experts on worm compost. Totally blow away most everybody else. And real farmer to farmer at the local level. They actually, in India, they have an organization, and the year I was there, they actually got 400 different farms to build a shade house and do it about half the size of this room and do worm beds, make worm compost, and go out and put it in their soil and totally improve their soil, which is very famished from the heat and the drought that they have there. So now the key thing here is that, yeah, you have nutrients. If you take compost, you analyze it, you're going to get NPK analysis. That is not what you're after. It's all the stuff together that's synergistic. It's the nutrients and the microorganisms and the humic acid, the hormones and enzymes and other microbial metabolites, bioactive substances. That's what's in it. It's very rich. It's been proven, research trial after research trial. You put worm compost into a potting mix at 15 or 20% by volume, boom, you totally improve plant productivity. So, so here's a couple examples. This is actually a working farm in India I was on. This is really common there, like I was describing. They actually have this as a shady little spot, and those are significant size worm piles. They're like 3 feet wide, about a foot and a half tall, and yay long. And so he had a crew there, and that was their thing. They made worm compost because the farm used it for their fertility. So that was an example, very common, like I said, in India and Cuba. Here's a friend of mine in Hawaii, and these are 12-inch pipes, like water pipes that are cut in two, turned into worm troughs. And then he gets food waste from a juicing bar. So he gets all this great, food stuff and, carrots, peels and all that stuff, feeds them to the worms. And look at this rich worm castings that he's getting. And he has a sprout operation. He makes a living growing sprouts, high-density sprouts, lettuces, wheatgrass, the whole thing. And it's all based on this. So his system is based on this. There's another cool thing I actually have done this too. This is kind of fun. Is if you can also do this on a small scale, like worm bins. And I've been to places where the people have 30 worm bins. That's how they do it instead of like in these troughs and things like that. So if you want to get the worms out of them, you get a big blue tarp and you put it on the ground outside and you dump your compost in the middle of it. And what happens is, so the worms start to crawl and you spread it out. You spread the compost out on the tarp. The worms will leave the material and all crawl to the center and start winding over each other to protect themselves from the sun. They don't like it. So there's another way to do this. There's a high-end worm bioreactor, and this is a system that is commercially available. And I know greenhouse operations that have a shed. They have this, and they make this high-quality worm compost, and that goes in the potting mix. And it's a huge, important factor in their fertility and their disease control program.